I'm very glad to welcome His Excellency, the Ambassador of Israel to Georgia, Mr. Yuval to Ilyas State University. Mr. Fuchs was appointed to this position in 2012, and since then he has been a very good friend of our university, supporting us in here, of course, the Embassy of Israel, supporting us in our various initiatives. And I was very glad to learn that he's a fellow philosopher with also an additional degree in history, which makes him a very good speaker for the topic which was selected for today. It's the topic of the global threat of terrorism, an Israeli perspective. And as we know, unfortunately, Israel has had a extensive experience with terrorism, but it's all the more important and interesting to know about how this experience was confronted and what measures were taken and how the Israeli view can be understood and taken into account by us. So I'm very glad to welcome once again Mr. Ambassador here today, and I'm now giving the floor to him so that he can have here his lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Maybe the ones at the back could come a little bit to the front. I forgot my glasses, I don't see. Thanks. First of all, it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you for this invitation, Mr. Rector, and I feel it's a privilege to be a friend of this university. You are a very vivid, young, active university. I've just visited the newly opened Fab Lab, and I understand there is another lab. And I believe very much in these directions. Definitely, I believe that Georgia is in need to develop entrepreneurship, innovations for the future. You're a small country like Israel. In terms of geography, you're bigger, so you're not so small. You're 3 times bigger than Israel in terms of space, geography, but you're smaller in terms of population, and you are still smaller in terms of economy, GDP. And what made Israel a developed country, because since 2010 we are among the OECD, the developed countries, not anymore a developing country, is not necessarily agriculture, for which Israel may be famous for, but the high tech. I'm not getting tired to say that when I grew up in Israel, 60s, 70s, Israel was exporting mainly 60-70% oranges and agro products. Today still we export agro products, not so much products but technologies. But the main exports of Israel is definitely not agriculture, but high-tech applications, all kind of innovative devices in medical care or agriculture. So I very much believe in this direction, and I'm always very glad to see this development in Georgia too. I believe this is your future. Now, studying philosophy doesn't make me very much qualified to deal with the issue of terrorism, I'm afraid. But that was long ago. I'm now with the ministry more than 20 years. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, Mr. Rector, living in Israel, and I was born there, my parents were born there, living in Israel, you are acquainted with the issue of terrorism since you are born. And I don't want to make any propaganda, but just to give you some examples of what does it mean. I was 11 years young, not old, when the Olympic Games in Munich took place, 1972. and 11 Israeli soldiers were kidnapped and then murdered in Munich and that Olympic Games. The 70s was a very frightening time for kids and teenagers in Israel. I was first a kid and a teenager. Airplanes were kidnapped, there were terror attacks in schools and in other places. And this is what we were taught in school, not to pick up pens, not to pick up buttons. On the walls there were placards not to do this and not to do that. Unfortunately, we have with that kind of reality still today. Our children live with that kind of reality today. But of course, terror, not only that it doesn't stop terror and terrorism, it develops. It develops technologically, it develops in every sense of how to recruit people, in the PR, of course living in this age of Facebook and internet, it's very important, and it develops as a phenomenon. Now, you see terrorism everywhere in the world, and don't be misled by the fact that it doesn't happen now. It does happen now. In these very moments where we think it happens. Now, when I say it happens, it doesn't mean that necessarily now a bomb explodes or a car explodes somewhere. But you can be certain that now, right now, as we are talking, those who are engaged with terrorism are preparing infrastructure or whatever. Now, when they will push the button, we don't know. Hopefully we will know, or I mean our agencies will know. Sometimes they don't know. But you can be 100% sure that there are people who are working right now to be able in a given moment to execute a terror attack. And this can be in Tel Aviv, and this can be in Paris, in a supermarket, or wherever, and this can be in London, in Madrid, and this can be in Tbilisi. It happens that we meet, it's really a coincidence, on the 13th of February. I don't know if you remember, but we remember at the embassy, exactly today, 3 years ago, today, only 3 years ago, not 30 years ago, 3 years ago, there was a bomb here in Tbilisi, 5 minutes from here, under my driver's car. And at that day, fortunately that bomb did not explode. That day, a couple of hours later, a second bomb exploded on embassy car in Delhi, our embassy car, and one of the diplomat spouses was severely wounded in that explosion. The next day, 14th of February that year, 2012, there was a terror attempt in Bangkok, Thailand. Same guys, I mean not same guys personally, but same association. That time it seems that there was a working accident for them, and the bomb exploded for them too early, so that the only people who were killed by that occasion were the terrorists themselves. But the bomb exploded in the center of Bangkok in daylight street. These are not the first attempts, these are not the last attempts, and you know Israeli targets are not the only targets in the world, and Jewish targets are also not the only targets in the world. Unfortunately, we are sometimes a beloved target by some groups, but we are definitely not the only one. Now, I want to jump a little bit ahead and tell you that yesterday I met the Minister of Interior, the new Minister of Interior here, and we have very good cooperation between our countries in that regard. And we have full understanding that terrorism is something that you have to fight together and that you cannot tolerate. There are many mechanisms how to deal with terrorism. Maybe we can deal with that a little later, but I want to share with you that we have full appreciation to our cooperation, and my understanding that this goes in both directions. There are things which should be done. We are working on that. The Georgian side is working on that. Don't have the illusion that it won't happen to me, it won't happen here. It happened here in Tbilisi. It was a matter of luck that the bomb did not explode. It happened here, it happened in Istanbul, it happened in Baku, in Cyprus, in Bulgaria. People were killed, people were wounded. Those who should know exactly who are behind it. You want me to tell you a secret? Who is behind it? Do you know who is behind it? You are living in a neighborhood, very sensitive neighborhood, I would say, and I'm not referring to your north. I understand that being here in this corner of the world, it's not a corner, but in this part of the world, and with your history and with your recent history, much of the assessment and much of what is written and much of what is shown in the media is about your north. And definitely there are things that should be assessed and learned in that direction. But as somebody who is coming from your south, only 2.5 hours flight, and this is only because the flight doesn't go directly over Syria, it goes over Turkey, so it's 2 hours flight, it's very short distance. I believe to London or to Brussels it's much more than 2 hours or 2.5 hours. As somebody who's coming from your south, I want to tell you, you are very, very, very close to your south too. And your south means not only Israel. We are good friends, and you know it, and we share values and history and long friendship and family friends and interest and future innovation, etc. And we are the only democracy in the Middle East. But in the Middle East, you have not only that, you have, you know what's going on since a couple of years in Egypt, in Syria, in Iraq. You know how big a challenge Iran poses to the international community in more than one sense. You are very close to all these places, and I think that there should be attention given to that direction too, to yourself. People are close, borders are not very big obstacles nowadays, and this is something which should be assessed. Now, let me give you a few observations about the terrorism in the world today. There are basically, as we see it, two main directions. One is the so-called Sunni global terrorism, Al-Qaeda-like schools, be it Al-Qaeda or what is left of Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda associated groups in Sinai or wherever. There are other organizations like Jabhat al-Nusra, which is in Iraq and in Syria. these organizations are, they are sharing, all of them are sharing more or less the philosophy of Al-Qaeda, hate the West, establish some kind of Caliphate country with Islamic rule, and everything is okay. Everything is okay. Killing kids, killing women. It's not. There is nothing. No obstacles. Then there are the other direction are the Shia organizations, which are, at least some of them are more local or in their orientation. Many of them are supported by Iran. And, but the division into Shia and Sunni is not valid anymore. I think in the Middle East what you see is the division line is more between regimes, countries which are more on the moderate side, which are more looking for, if not democracy, then at least stability. And there are those organizations, states, which are factors of destability in the region. And about the other side, this destabilizer, I can name Iran, which is a big destabilizer in the region. I can name Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Nusra, organization like Al-Qaeda or association of Al-Qaeda in Sinai. Now, they may be a danger for Israel too, but these associations, these Al-Qaeda terrorists in Sinai, are first and foremost danger not for Israel but for Egypt. They kill Egyptian soldiers, they slaughter Egyptian soldiers. They're Egyptian by nationality, or they may be Egyptian by nationality. They slaughter Egyptian soldiers. It happened, I think 2 weeks ago. 23 people were killed by a bomb in a city, Egyptian city in Sinai. They pose a danger to the stability of the Egyptian regime. So on the other side, what we see, and I'm not speaking now about who is more democratic, who is less democratic. I'm speaking about those who are committed to stability and security in the region. And here we see, of course, Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East. We see Jordan, which is very much committed to stability and to fight the Al-Qaeda-like, and the other organizations. And we all have seen, I didn't want to watch, but what happened, how the Jordanian pilot, which was kidnapped by IS or ISIL, or what they call themselves, the Islamic State, how cruelly he was murdered. Egypt is definitely among the countries and forces who contribute to stabilization in the region. Saudi Arabia to some extent. Now on the other side we see, as I said, Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Nusra, ISIL. They are not interested in stabilization. Sometimes they speak in the name of resistance or liberation of this or that. Now we see Hezbollah, which is basically a Lebanese organization, Lebanese Shia organization supported by Iran. We see it acting not anymore hidden on the Syrian Golan Heights. They are blamed now by the Lebanese government for importing destability into Lebanon, because they are acting on the Golan Heights. So if they will provoke, there will be an escalation. If there will be an escalation, there can be a deterioration between Israel and Lebanon. Such a deterioration, of course, the Lebanese government would have to be accountable for its citizen, for the security situation, and of course they have a lot to lose if there will be a deterioration in the situation. So Hezbollah is being criticized by the Lebanese president, whereas they are part, so to speak, of the Lebanese politics. We don't buy that. We don't buy that. Speaking for a moment about Hezbollah, but there are other organizations that we could speak about. Hamas. We don't buy that the terror organization is partly a terror organization and partly a political organization. That it has a political wing and a wing partly and a military wing. Do you see any political party wing wherever in the world, in Israel, in Georgia, in the United States, which has not only a militia, it's not a militia what they have. Hezbollah has in Lebanon, in the south of Lebanon, army which is equipped stronger than many state armies, with more than 100 rockets which could hit any point in Israel. Now, where they get this arms from, that's another question. But I don't, I don't want to engage with domestic issues here. But neither Georgian Dream, not UNM, not Free Democrats, and in my country, no party is in possession of rockets and armies. That's impossible. It can't be that you are sitting in the parliament as a political party, being part of the political life, and at the same time you have a military wing. No, I don't buy that. One of the basic, it is being criticized in Israel, but one of the basic breakthroughs between Israel and the Palestinians in the early 90s. You remember Yasser Arafat was the leader of the PLO for many, many years. And one of the things which enabled to talk with them was that they recognized Israel, and they said in written, in a letter from Yasser Arafat to President Bush, not Bush, Clinton at the time, pardon me, that they give up the way of terrorism. There is no more terrorism. Unfortunately, this wasn't the reality in the years to come, and Yasser Arafat was playing with terrorism as a toy, as a game. When he needed, the flames went higher, and when he needed, the flames went lower. But unfortunately, every city in Israel and every place in Israel and almost every date in Israel carries with it very sad memories for all of us. Now, we shouldn't wait. Not we. We definitely don't wait, and we definitely, the Israeli philosophy is very simple. We hit them before they hit you. We have before they hit us. We have the right to defend ourselves. We are doing it within. I stress this. Our democratic values. We have a very severe, clear legislation concerning what is right and what is wrong, what is allowed and what is not allowed. And we are very much committed to it. So these are the basic principles. Of course, there are many other implementations. I would like to share with you some thoughts. One, we shouldn't wait. Nowhere. They don't sleep. Sometimes you sleep. One can read about sleeping cells or something. There are no sleeping cells. They work. They get passports. they get apartments, they get cars, they get bank accounts, they work, they prepare infrastructure, they mislead people, they mislead naive people, tell you buy me a car, I'm just a businessman or something like that. They prepare infrastructures. So we shouldn't wait. It can happen today, it can happen tomorrow. This is one thing. We shouldn't wait for the next, so to speak, wake-up call. Why wait for the next wake-up call? So people will be killed or people will be wounded, and then what? And then what? We have to be on alert all the time. This is one. To realize that this is for real and that this touches our life. Second is to combat terrorism is, I would say, a multi-level or multi-layers or multifaceted challenge. It has to be tackled on all these dimensions at the same time. One very important dimension is international cooperation. Without international cooperation, it will be very, very, very difficult for any country. For any country. We need to cooperate with the willing, with those who are interested in stabilization, in stability, in peace, not only in the region but in the world. And this we can do in more than one way. This cooperation. Another layer beyond international cooperation is, of course, legislation. Countries, organizations, international organizations, we all need legislation. We all need the legal basis to act. There are some UN resolutions like 1373 and others which are basic resolutions. 1373, for example, is a resolution of the Security Council of the UN from late 2001. It followed the Twin Towers in September 11 that year. And this is one of the basic resolutions of the UN Security Council on terrorism and about sanctioning Al-Qaeda. But I have to share with you something that you know. In the UN, which is composed of something like, I think, 190 states, and the Security Council is composed of 15 states, it's very difficult to reach consensus on anything, Now go get consensus on the issue, A, what is terrorism? B, who do we define as terrorist? Think about yourself. You try to go through or to bring a resolution. Georgia will try to bring a resolution concerning some terror organization from Pankisi or from the North Caucasus. Now you have to deal with one of the permanent members in the Security Council that has veto right. And you know who I'm talking about. Now I don't know, maybe they will be in favor, but maybe not. Maybe not. Now that, it exists not only between you and your neighbors, it exists almost between everybody and anybody. So to get consensus there, except which was got at that 1373 after the Twin Towers, which was universal event of a scope that we haven't seen before, is practically almost impossible. Now, what does it mean that we should stop trying? No, of course not. We should always try to do what is possible within the big international organizations, but there are also other international organizations such as EU or different commissions dealing with money laundering or with drug smuggling, terror needs money. A lot of the money comes from certain countries, but a lot of the money comes also from drugs and from all kind of illegal dealings. So it's very important to do this monitoring in all countries, and there are specific organizations dealing with that. By the way, in Georgia too, and Georgia is very much committed here and very, very helpful, I think. So when I speak about legislation, I think that countries should look very carefully whether they have all the legal mechanisms necessary in order to secure for their citizens, for their country. And there are many security measures, many amendments or legislation. Just recently, the Ministry of Interior here introduced some amendments to the existing criminal code on fighting terrorists who may return, who go to Syria, from Pankisi, and who may return. This is a very good measure. There are other measures we are discussing. I don't want to go into details, but legislation is very, very important. Why? Because it gives you the legal right to act. We are not acting. We are diplomats and students and professors and directors, but it gives those who should act the legal right to do so. I'm not speaking about anything extraordinary. I'm speaking about the right to interrogate somebody, the right to arrest somebody, the right to refuse somebody from coming into the country, the right maybe to confiscate bank account if you have, of course, and this should be defined in your legal code, if you have enough evidence. Now the evidence is not on the side of the lawmakers. The evidence is again on the side of the agencies. Now about the agencies we spoke before when we said that agencies should work in international cooperation. So again, internationalism, cooperation, one element, legislation, another element. Another element which I think is very, very important, this is deeper than legislation, human rights. You will be surprised, but dealing with terrorism, we need very deep respect for human rights, because we wouldn't have the right, I think, to do anything unless we do it in the name of our human being, in the name of that we will be more than 100% sure that we protect ourselves as citizens, as human beings, and we are not just misusing or abusing some force given to us by the name of the state if we work for some agency. There are minorities which should be respected, and not only minorities, human rights and respect for this basic humanistic view. Therefore, there are in many countries basic law. In Israel, there is a law. Now there is a new bill, a new draft on basic law on counter-terrorism, which is the main thing of it is to find the balance between human rights, democracy, democratic values, Western values, and at the same time, but in a way on the other side, the need to act. And sometimes the need to act very fast. And sometimes the need to act in a powerful way. So this legislation, this bill is trying to find the balance between them. Now another principle is, I think, or another matter which is needed is have very strong, very advanced technology. You can't hit, it's asymmetric war. We speak today about asymmetric warfare. It's not dealing with, it's not anymore, when you deal with terrorism, it's not, it hasn't been, never, it's not dealing army with army, it's not tanks and tanks, you know, it's dealing with terrorists who sometimes they may have only a knife in their pocket, which is deadly, you know, it can kill, it kills, or an axe, or they can drive a car and kill people by car or by tractor. These are all facts that happened, you know. Or they can have much more than that. They can have a bomb, they can have a rifle, they can have a missile, they can have, I don't know, God forbid, they could have, they could be in possession of atomic bomb at some point. You know, there are many films about that, God forbid it will happen. When you deal with cells, sometimes individuals, somebody who went to Iraq because he saw some video on YouTube or something, and he was recruited. He wasn't even Islamist, he became so. And he went there, and he was trained, and he was brainwashed, and he became a believer. And then he comes back to Brussels, and then he feels like, I want to do. And then he kills 3 people at the Jewish museum in Brussels or somewhere. And we see more of them recently, and you know, we are speaking about thousands of people who went from Europe to Iraq, Syria, and are returning, may returning. So sometimes it's an individual who doesn't even have some kind of command and control and something like this. So to tackle this, you need very strong technology. I think I would stop here and open it for. There are many more things to be said, but I think I would stop here. But before doing so, I want to make one political point about Israel. You know, not Israel, not Georgia, we cannot choose our neighbors or neighborhoods. And we are living in a very tough neighborhood, and you are living in not a very simple neighborhood. But this is where we are, and this is where you are. And one doesn't choose his parents, and one doesn't choose his geography or culture, or, you know, this is your place, this is our place, this is where we are, this is where we belong. And this is where we have chosen to express ourselves as nations, and this is also our right to do so. Now, living under these difficult circumstances, environments, we both our countries have chosen democratic direction, Western direction. Israel is 67, Georgia is a bit younger than this, so we are a little bit more experienced, but we are sure, we are confident that you are going exactly the same way, being a very solid and developed democracy. Of course, it is a process, it doesn't happen overnight, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but not only in the politics. And I really want to share with you, because sometimes you see awful pictures coming through the media from the Middle East, and you know, the power of the camera is very, very strong, very strong. But the camera brings, I don't think I will tell you any secret, the camera and the news, they're bringing good stories that sells. I'm sorry that I'm using this business language, but this is the reality. Like, what I like, yes? Now this like attitude was before like was born. What people would like to see. Now, unfortunately, the story of, well, it's not unfortunately, when a bomb or when a missile shot by the army hits a school, which hosted an hour before that terrorists with their arsenal and whatever, and unfortunately it misses or it hits kids or whatever. This is terrible. This is terrible. There is no excuse for this. I want to tell you, I don't think there is any country that is investigating itself more than Israel. I don't think there is, really, honestly. I don't think there is any country, any army in the world which is investigating itself for its mistakes and things which unfortunately happen in these situations more than the Israeli army. But don't be confused. This is not the whole picture, and this is not the whole story. This is not the whole story. The story is much bigger than this. I don't want to go into, this political story, but since you had your 5 days war in summer 2008, since then, 2008, there were 3 rounds, not less than 3 rounds of, call it war, or call it, I don't know, operation, call it whatever, little war in Gaza between us and Hamas in early 2009, and then in November 2012, and then last summer. I want to remind you, so 3 wars since your war. The last one was 51 days. Each of them got a little longer. In these 3 wars, more than thousands, many thousands of rockets were shot at Israeli cities in the south by Hamas, which is a declared terror organization by many, many countries. And I want to remind you one basic thing. Israel left Gaza totally. It disengaged from Gaza. It evacuated settlements and settlers. This was back in 2005, late 2005. We are not there anymore. There is no one Israeli settler, no one Israeli soldier. We don't want to be there. We don't want to be there. Now, what happened is that after we left, there were Palestinians' elections, and Hamas took control over Gaza, but they are not adhering, not listening to the PLO leadership in the West Bank, which is much more moderate and willing to cooperate and to negotiate with Israel and Abu Mazen. We have our difficulties with them, but these are more political. And this is basically the story. There is a big question in the world, and you see it every day if you follow New York Times or the political magazines. What about political Islam? Don't be confused. There is a big question about political Islam. Whether it has chances, it has no chances. There are very big differences between what happens in Tunisia and what happened in Egypt or in other countries. But there is a big gap between political Islam doesn't mean terrorism. Okay? There might be problems or questions with political Islam, and I'm not an expert, so I don't want to comment on that. But political Islam is not equal terrorism. We all know what we're talking about when we talk about terrorism and terror groups. Terror groups may be enemies also of political Islam. Basically, they are enemies of everybody. I think I will stop here and open it to any comments or questions from your side. Thank you very much.
very much for this very interesting, informative, but also very passionate lecture about a very troublesome subject. And now the floor is open for questions, comments, discussions, and Nino will be the first one to ask the questions.
Thank you very much for a very interesting lecture, first of all. As you mentioned, terrorists, they never sleep, they create infrastructure, and they are always ready for another attack. So every single country should be on alert constantly, right? In case of Georgia, in addition to the measures already taken by the government, what should be done to be on alert all the time?
Should we?
Yes, gather some questions, perhaps some other questions from the audience. I will add one myself. So, do you think that the appearance of ISIS, or United States, has changed the dynamics connected with terrorism, or is just one kind of complication more, but nothing unusual, or does it change the kind of the whole region dynamics and the also the whole extension of the problem with terrorism?
Okay. To ISIS, I don't think it has changed. Of course, there are changes on the ground. What we have seen in Syria and in Iraq, that they took possessions of cities and of regions, but no, I don't think that there was one thing which existed in the past, which has become in a way stronger, and this is the power of video, the power of YouTube or the other channels. I think that we know about something between 10 and 20 people who were beheaded by ISIL, and the videos were posted so that all of us could watch this terrible, cruel people, what they do. But let's face it, we knew about it before, didn't we? It's not that we never had an idea that things like this happen, and it's not that with all the cruelty and with all the sadness, it's not that these 20 men and women or so, it changed the reality on the ground. But it did change something. It changed our mental perception of things. And they learned very quickly how to misuse us. They put English-speaking people to do almost like advertisement for their killing. And they do put these terrible videos knowing that they will be viral, because we are all humans, so this is how it works. And let's admit it, these terrible videos moved something in Washington too. Now again, I guess not because of those 10 or 20 people, not because something on the ground things were as terrible as before, but the world could not stand it anymore, in a way, to put it in a very simple way. But we have seen this in the past too, not in maybe not this, but we have seen variation of this in the past too. When we all of us saw the terrible pictures of the Twin Towers collapsing like House of Cards that terrible day, nobody could believe it, right? This was like seeing Nagasaki, Hiroshima in real time. I mean, I didn't live at that time in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, but this is conceptually, like seeing the end of the world is coming. So we have seen this power of video, this power of the picture before, power of technology and mass media. No, I don't think, I think things are in a way even clearer today in the Middle East. As complicated as they are, and they are very complicated, in a way it's very simple. In a way we're talking about the extremists, those who support terror and terrorism, those who are, I would even say, committed to terrorism, and those who are committed to stability and peace. At least this. I wouldn't say that in that camp of people, countries who are committed to stability and peace, you see only democracies. No, unfortunately there is only one developed democracy in the Middle East so far. I wish there would be more. But no, so we have to share and to cooperate with countries that we don't share all our values with, but we share something which is very basic. And you know, it's a sad story. I don't know what is more sad, that here you see Arabs or Muslim killing Arabs and Muslim more than they hate Jews in Israel. Now I don't know what is more sad. Both are sad, but this is the reality right now. So no, I think what is a lesson for me is that there is more clarity with whom we should work, with who are our real partners, and for us Israel it's very clear. It's Egypt, it's Jordan, it's the moderate forces in the region. Even if they don't love us, and they don't love us, there is no big love story between Egyptian leadership and Israeli leadership, or I don't think that today you would see many Israeli tourists in Cairo, and you wouldn't see one Egyptian tourist in Israel. But we have also some good signs. Recently, the Jordanian ambassador was returned to Israel after he was called back at some point of a political escalation. So there are also opportunities. This is one point, there are also opportunities, and the other point, the other lesson is that we shouldn't be confused. I read here and there noises, I would say, as if you know, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. No, I'm not buying that. You know, that Iran to some extent sees maybe Israel as an enemy because they are Sunni and they are Shia, doesn't make them good guys. At the same time, they support Shia terror organizations, so one should be more than careful in dealing with them as if they are now constructive in a way because they are the enemy of the other enemy. No, you should fight these terrorists, you should fight that terrorist, or you should fight everybody who is associated. Now, if Iran chooses to change, this is another story. But so far I don't see that, neither on the nuclear issue nor on the support for terrorism. So that on the ISIS or ISIL or whatever, Islamic State question. On Georgia, it's not about sharing now any specific information, of course, and it's not my occupation. I'm a diplomat. But I think that the people who are dealing with that know what they should do, know what other possible legal mechanisms are lacking. I'm on record, so there is an interview with me in First Palitra from 2 weeks ago, so you can read. I'm on record saying that Georgia should introduce the mechanism of terror lists. This is a mechanism which exists in all EU countries, in the EU as such, in the United States of America, in Russia, Israel, Bahrain, India, Japan, Canada, and I forgot another, I don't know how many countries. Now it's a very simple legal mechanism which enables you to designate a terror organization if your agencies tells you this is a terror organization, you designate it as a terror organization. It makes their life more difficult to open bank accounts, to do money transfers or any kind of actions. Now again, I think we have a very good dialogue with the Georgian authorities, and we are working on all the open questions. The basic thing for me is the mindset. The mindset is that you are in a region, or let's put it that way. Tel Aviv and Tbilisi is 2.5 hours flight. If the flight would go over Syria, it would be 2 hours flight, but never mind, 2.5 hours flight. In between us, and this is a much shorter distance than Tbilisi. How much is it, Tbilisi, Brussels? 4 hours, probably?
4.5.
4.5. So it's a shorter distance. In this short distance, or in between Tel Aviv and Tbilisi, there are no democracies. There are no democracies, but you know who there are. You know, there are ISIL, there are Hezbollah, Syria, Iraq, very destabilized situations. Nusra organizations, other organizations that we haven't heard the name, but tomorrow, the day, a year ago, none of us, or maybe a year and a half, I remember, none of us knew the name ISIL, right? Now everybody knows. Now everybody knows. Now who knows the next name, the next big name? Like it was with Al-Qaeda some 15 years ago. Who knew Al-Qaeda 16, 17 years ago? I don't remember. I remember Al-Qaeda since more or less Twin Towers and a little bit before that. So it's a matter of state of mind, I think, to understand that this is a challenge. I think it is there. It is developing. It is there, and I see good signs that the authorities are working very hard in that direction, and I believe if there, I mean, Georgia knows better what is necessary for Georgia than I do. I can only share some of our experience and some of our thoughts. Thank you.
So, if there are no additional questions, then, please.
First of all, thank you very much. It was a fascinating presentation. And I have one question. As you rightly pointed out, among the terrorists are many young Arabs who were maybe born in Europe, raised in Europe, and they somehow ended up in Syria, where they were brainwashed, and upon their return to Brussels, they decided to do something. And I have a question. Like we saw that Europe got several wake-up calls already. And do you think, in your opinion, like, are European governments going to change their policies towards integration? Because, yeah, it's a bitter lesson, I think. And so far, I'm afraid they were not thinking about the issue seriously enough. So, yeah, thank you very much. Just your opinion on it.
Thank you very much for your interesting lecture and analysis. My question are not about terrorism, but about the, I think, regional politics. First question about today's relations between Israel and Turkey and the problems concerning these relations. And second question is Israeli attitude towards the Kurdish problem. hypothetical creation of the Kurdish state in Iraq? Thank you.
Thank you. On the second question, I don't know the answer. I don't know whether there is any policy paper on the Kurdish problem. On Turkey, you know, I love Turkey myself as a country, as people. We feel very similar in a way. Israel and Turkey used to be in the past very close friends, politically speaking. We are still very close friends, economically speaking. The trade grew since in the last years. Politically, unfortunately, we have gone through a crisis which hasn't been solved yet. There were noises time and again about how to resolve it. At the moment, not everything is solved, and I'm not in the details, so I cannot tell you. When and if everything will be solved. We don't have ambassadors right now in Turkey. We have a chargé. I think my awareness is that they don't have an ambassador in Israel. The peak of the escalation was then Navi Marmara flotilla, which went to Israel of 6 boats, but only one of the boats was violent, and unfortunately some people were killed. But there is a big dispute on that and on the background, and why it happened only to that boat and only on that boat, and how it happened that soldiers which tried to take over that boat were injured and were thrown off board to the sea. You know, we have seen in recent years very harsh rhetoric coming from Turkey towards Israeli leadership in many occasions. I remember an event in Davos between Erdogan and Peres. Peres is not necessarily, or you know, Nobel Prize for Peace is somebody who for the whole world represents and stands for as a peace promoter. So if you fight with Peres, but I don't want to go into that. I'm very hopeful that we will become friends again. I think that much of it has to do with domestic politics in Turkey, and not between Israel and Turkey. The interests are there. As I said, the trade is, if I remember the number, it's over $3 billion. It's not only big for Israel, it's also big for Turkey. If my memory doesn't mislead me, we are among the 15th biggest trade partner of Turkey. So you know, if they are a big trade partner for Israel, this is one thing, because we are still smaller than Turkey. But if we are among their top trade partners, and we are, this is a big thing. And we are not only in terms of trade, also in terms of tourism. Israelis love to go to Turkey. They were going to Turkey. It has decreased. There were all kind of cooperations in the past. I cannot predict about the future. My hope is that we will find the formula and the ways to each other. These are two countries which share this in between West and East, you know, in between cultures. Turkey was there, on the one hand, it was the second country after Armenia and before Georgia to adopt Christianity, but then it became a Muslim country. It is both in Europe and geographically in Europe and in Asia. Israel is in Asia, but it's very much a Western country, so we share very much. And of course, there is and was even bigger Jewish community in Turkey. But I don't have any concrete news on on that at the moment. On integration of immigration, well, that's an answer I don't know to answer. I mean, this is rather a question for European societies and government. I lived 8 years in Germany. I'm a little bit aware and acquainted with this phenomena, and you are right that it has to do also with integration of people, but I don't know. Only my sense, only guessing. I haven't done a research, but I don't know if integration is the only thing behind that. Because you said that we see Arabs going. No, we see also European who are not Arabs, who becomes Muslim, who how do you say, Muslimize themselves, or who turn Muslim? Yes, yes. Who go to Syria and so it's not only among immigrants, and I don't even know the percentage, and even if it was only among immigrants, I think you have to look for other reasons, not only, it is an important factor, integration, but you also see success stories. Speaking about integration, at least my 8 years in Germany, I've seen success stories of integration. If it's Turkish immigrants, if it's immigrants from Arab countries, so you cannot put it all on integration. Integration is, it's a huge question for everybody. It's a huge question for Israel. We are a country of immigrants. My grandparents were immigrants. My wife is an immigrant. My kids were born not in Israel. So, but that's not the only. It can't be, in my opinion, the only reason why people turn to other directions. There must be something more than this, I think. But yes, the integration is a big question for Europe, definitely, and especially for the southern part, but maybe not only, but that's not, I don't know to answer that. I'm not so much in the discussion, so maybe I didn't answer the question, but this is the most I can do, so.
Thank you very much for this very interesting afternoon we spent in your company, and I hope that this is not your last visit. I'm sure this is not your last visit, so our cooperation in French will continue. Thank you very much for coming and for questions.
Thank you.